Hey there, we are live at, well, we're here at Build. Pretty exciting. There's some really good announcements. I read a tweet. By the way, this is Mads, my good friend.
Hello.
What do you work on?
I work on Visual Studio and all the web tooling in Visual Studio.
Web tooling in Visual Studio. So it brings me to this anecdote. There was this guy who did a tweet. He's like, hey, I'm coming back to JavaScript development after 6 months of doing X. Oh my goodness, everything is different. What's changed in the last 6 months when it comes to developing for the web and JavaScript?
In the last 6 months, probably not that much, like drastically.
I know, it was a joke, obviously.
Yeah, but things moving fast, that's for sure. Yeah, and so especially on our stack, where we now see this adoption in Visual Studio of the node-based tools, such as Bower and NPM, the package managers, and Grunt and Gulp, the task runners.
Okay.
That helps us minify and bundle our JavaScript files and compile TypeScript and so on. And that sort of runs Node and cross-platform,
Right.
And it's a very different world, especially for like maybe the typical Visual Studio user of the past, you know. So in that sense, a lot of stuff has happened. New frameworks come out. You know, it's things are moving.
There's so many things to keep track of when it comes to web development. So I am just going to start naming some things, and let's see if we can put them in the appropriate buckets.
Okay.
So NPM, what is that?
Package manager, Node package manager.
Okay, Bower.
That's a client-side library package manager.
So they're both package managers.
Yes.
What's the difference between NPM and Bower?
Well, so there are fundamental differences, but they're also very similar. Let's just take NuGet in there as well, because those are sort of the three package managers we now have to deal with. So
Right.
let's just split them apart a little bit.
Okay.
So NuGet, that we know and love for many years, have provided us with both server-side components like DLL files, right? But also client-side stuff like jQuery and Bootstrap, AngularJS, you know, for the client side. So in the new world of ASP.NET 5, NuGet will only be handling the server-side components.
Like the assemblies?
The assemblies, the DLL files, you know?
Okay.
But it will not handle client-side packages anymore. So for that, we want to use Bower, because that's our client-side package manager now. So what's really cool about that is that Bower is a lot larger, has a lot more packages available than NuGet has for the client-side space. And that's also where, you know, people that actually build the frameworks, that's
where they put it.
They put it on Bower, so
Yeah.
it's always up to date, and it's a huge ecosystem. So it's a great gain for us Visual Studio and .NET developers that we have access to this natively within Visual Studio now, because we just have more options, and that's great.
Is there overlap between NPM and Bower?
Yes. So how we look at it is internally in Visual Studio, we kind of treat NPM more as a way to bring in tooling. So NuGet is for assemblies. Bower for client-side components.
Client-side.
NPM for tooling. Okay?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So that would, for instance, be stuff that helps you run tasks on your app, like help you compile Less and Sass and CoffeeScript and TypeScript. Will help you minify and bundle your JavaScript.
I see.
It can help with all those tasks. So think about MS Build, right? That's a sort of a tooling thing, but we now have these things called Grunt and Gulp. You install them into your project using NPM, the Node package manager. So, but there's still like a little bit of overlap, because
there's a lot of overlap.
you will still find client-side packages on NPM, like the same ones that are on Bower. So if you want to, you can say, I just want to use NPM. It doesn't have as many client-side packages, but more and more people are actually putting client-side packages on NPM. So you could say, I'm just going to use NPM for both client-side packages, and potentially, if you want to, your build orchestration stuff, your tooling.
Got it. Yeah. Well, that makes a little bit more sense. So NPM and Bower and NuGet, they're all in the same family. NuGet for assemblies, NPM to bring in tooling. And then Bower to bring in client-side frameworks.
That's right.
Like Angular, etc.
Yes.
All right. So now that we've gone through those three, so we have NPM, Bower, and NuGet. Now we have Grunt and Gulp. What are those?
Yeah, so they are the ones that we bring in using NPM. A couple of tooling components. So Grunt and Gulp, they're competitors. Right?
Oh, I see.
They kind of solve the same problem of orchestrating or running tasks on your client-side app. And so I was mentioning like stuff like compiling Less and Sass and CoffeeScript, or bundling and minification, stuff like that. And what's really cool about this is that because we install them in our project, individual project, just like when you install a NuGet package, that's to this specific project, right?
Right.
What happens here is that you can have a specific version of a compiler in that one project and a different version in another project, and they don't collide.
And it's okay.
And that's perfectly fine, right? So you can, the tooling, sort of the compilers and all that follow the project. So that's a new world, sort of.
Right.
And so if you're doing any ASP.NET 5, Core CLR and all that stuff, where we also have like the idea of shipping the actual runtime in the app itself, right?
So now the server stuff is in there, and now the client stuff, and so you'll be able to reliably work on stuff without things messing up.
Yep. That basically means that your entire app now is completely isolated and can be worked on by multiple people, shared across GitHub or a bigger team or whatever.
Right.
And you always know that the tooling is going to be the same.
So that means that Grunt and Gulp, what is their role? What do they do?
So they're the ones that help us with compiling and bundling and minification and that sort of client-side task that you might have.
So any task. So a task might
any
be
task.
taking your less and converting into CSS, or
Yes.
taking your TypeScript and
Yes.
converting it to JavaScript.
Exactly.
Okay, so now that we've sort of got a framework, we understand that NPM, Bower, and NuGet are for bringing in packages, and then Grunt and Gulp are for running tasks. How do you make this magic happen when you're using Visual Studio? And that's where you come in, right?
Yes. So we talked about this actually a long time back now. And so we had some ideas. We had to make sure that these tools, which are, they're primarily used on the command line today, we had to make sure that they would, when they were used within Visual Studio, that the command line would still work in the exact same way.
Got it.
There would be no Visual Studio specifics needed to consume these new tools.
Right.
And that the user can opt out, saying, I don't want to use Visual Studio to handle any of this, I'll just do it on the command line, or I don't want to use it at all, right?
So we have completely divested ourselves of the not invented here syndrome, and we've just said, it works there, let's just use those tools.
Yeah, but with one big difference, right?
Let's see it.
If we were going to do anything in Visual Studio on top of this stuff, it had to be a better experience than what is out there today using the command line.
Well, you got something to show us?
Yes,
All right,
let's
let's
take a
do
look.
it.
So here I have a project. It's a pretty empty ASP.NET 5 project. And I thought, let's just build a really small little static website here.
Okay.
So I'm just going to add a index.html. So let's just do that. Here we go.
Oh, wow, that was clever. Is that stuff you built too?
That could be Web Essentials. That might be it. But I think actually it's built in.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, little hidden snippet. But anyway, let's say that I want to build this website right here, and I want to add Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is this client-side CSS framework, right?
To make things fit nicely and be responsive.
Responsive
right?
web, and I like that framework. There are a lot of frameworks like them out there, like Bootstrap, but Bootstrap is sort of the big one. So now we want to bring it in using Bower.
Okay.
And so what I want to do is I want to create a bower.json file. That is the equivalent, if you're familiar with NuGet, that is the equivalent of packages.config.
Okay.
So we're going to create bower.json in the root of the project here.
There's like a really cool little icon there at the bottom right, just to show you we know what you're using now, and it's okay.
Well, it's because that we're ending up with a lot of JSON files, and JSON sort of looks like similar, right? They look the same. So having a little icon here.
Yeah.
This is from Web Essentials. I'm just experimenting with this because
Got it.
I like it. So what's really cool is that we have this new JSON editor in Visual Studio, and we can now see here that we get like folded.
That's I think that's where the experience gets better.
Yep.
Because if you're typing this in just a regular editor, right, you're going to have to be fumbling around to make sure you're typing the right thing.
Exactly.
Where are you getting these definitions from?
Well, if we take a look up here, we can see that there's a URL that points to schemastore.org. Right? So schemastore.org has like a lot of different JSON schema files. It's open source. The cool thing is that any schema that is on there, Visual Studio will automatically apply to a file that has a specific name that's matched up to that schema file. So like in this case, we know that bower.json matches this URL, this schema, up on Schema Store.
So if there's like some new Whizbang Z that comes out, we're going to be able to support it as long as it's in the JSON Schema Store.
We don't have to update Visual Studio at all. Just send a pull request to schemastore.org and we're good to go.
That's on the side note, right? Because it seems like that's actually really cool. All right.
Yep. All right, so we need to give it a name here. Whatever. And
Web application 38 is the right.
yeah,
You should have right.
we could write whatever we want.
Right.
But look here, you get like nice descriptions and all that sort of stuff, all coming.
And it puts the brackets because it knows it needs an object and everything.
It's a really, really great experience typing in JSON. You don't need to put in the quotes and all that. It kind of just does that. So let's do Bootstrap. Look here how you get like IntelliSense from Bower, in the Bower registry
That's
online.
awesome.
And we can do that. So that's the latest version. I'm going to now save this file. Now check out what's happening here.
Is there magic stuff
So
happening?
something here is now
Something's
happening.
There's
Right.
magic.
And something is happening here in the manager log here, package
And
manager
it looks
log.
like it's calling Bower. It's not. We're
Yep.
not inventing something
Nope.
new here.
Nope.
Okay.
And so it's running, and we can see dependencies up here. We now get Bower, and we now see Bootstrap is installed. And it has a dependency on jQuery.
Right.
And that's all being brought down to us. The dependency is handled by Bower itself.
Right.
So that's super easy. I simply just typed what I wanted. I got IntelliSense for it, and I just saved the file.
And that's it.
That's it, right? Normally, if you would do this in the command line, you would have to open the command line. You would
Save.
know what the name of the
Yeah.
package was and the version potentially if you didn't want the latest and so on. Now we just save the file.
This is cool.
Yeah. So that's really nice. And if we look at the folder structure here, we can see that we now have Bower components.
Yeah, and that's the standard way that Bower stores stuff.
You can change that to be a different location, a different name, but by default, Bower installs into Bower_components.
And if you want to change that, you'd have to go into the Bower configuration.
Yeah, you can just basically add a .bower.rc file, and you can configure that and keep that in your project, and that will then honor that.
And that speaks more towards us respecting what Bower is doing because it's doing it fine.
Yes, however Bower works is how Visual Studio works on top of that.
Got it.
Right, because underneath, everything Visual Studio does is just acting like a proxy between you and the command line.
Got it.
Because at the end of the day, anything that happens in Visual Studio calls the command line.
Got it.
Right. So anyway, we can see here that we have our Bootstrap and we have these different things, but we don't have the Bower components over here, so we actually hide that. We can of course show it by say show hidden files and
yeah.
folders, and it shows up right here.
Because you don't want to be messing with that because Bower is in control.
Yeah, well, you could just use this and consume anything that's in Bower components. But what I like to do is that I like to use Gulp. That I can set up a task that copies just the files I need
That
from the
lifts
Bower
it out of
components
the okay.
and puts it into my app in the location I want it
I
to
see.
be.
So
in.
now we're starting to see the difference here.
Yes.
We use Bower to bring in part of the UI stuff that we're doing, and we're going to use Gulp. Is that what we're using? We're going to use Gulp to take just the stuff we want out of Bower components when we compile or sort of release this thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in order to install Gulp, that's tooling.
Right.
We use npm.
That's right.
And so npm, this is very similar. Package.json. We add that file, and we get the exact same experience. So name,
That's awesome.
version, and it needs a semver, so it looks like this. And then we need dependencies. Actually, we need dev dependencies. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to get Gulp.
Okay.
Oh, there, Gulp. And let's do that. And I'm just going to save this, and we can see again. Something is happening. I just saved the
magic.
file. Magic is now
Nothing
underway.
up our sleeves, people.
And
Nothing up our sleeves.
And npm now shows up here under dependencies.
That's awesome.
Okay, so it's installing in the background. So it's not done yet. So it says 0 here.
Still working on it.
It's still working on it. So that means that we now bring in the tool Gulp.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and if we look at that in the file explorer here, we have Gulp in the node modules folder.
That's
and
cool.
again, we don't show node modules over here because this you probably don't want to have in your app. Again, there could be situations where you do, but
Well, it's tooling.
you might
right?
not.
It's tooling.
Yeah, if that's what you're using it for, exactly. So now we just have to create a gulp file.js. Now this is where Gulp, that's sort of its initial file. It has to be called gulp file.js. And
I love the
have the
little
little
icon,
logo.
right? That's awesome.
yeah, now check this out. Gulp, tab, right?
Holy cow, that's so cool.
You get a little extra here, a little snippet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use Gulp to create a task that copies Bootstrap from Bower components into my file, right? Or into my project. So I'm going to say Gulp source, and you're going to use this for most of the Gulp files, Gulp tasks that you do.
Uh-huh.
Whoop. And this right here means
Same directory.
root
Root
yeah.
directory.
So we're going to take Bower components, and we're going to take bootstrap. So I kind of know what to write here, right? I know what this is. So I'm going to say anything that's inside the dist file. Right? This is a globbing pattern. So I'm going to take all that. I'm going to pipe that. Notice how you get IntelliSense here, really rich IntelliSense and descriptions. Cool. Gulp.destination. So this sort of creates. This is a streaming system. So this kind of this is a helper, gulp destination. That's sort of the file stream that then puts stuff on disk, and we're just going to give that a destination. So let's create a new folder, lib and bootstrap, just like that. I'm going to save this file. So now we have the new Task Runner Explorer.
Oh, that's cool. Zoom in on that. That's cool.
Right? So now we can just execute that task that we just created. Copy right here. It ran.
Could you zoom in on that? Because I want to make sure that everyone can see that we're just literally running gulp.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like we've redone anything. This is gulp.
This is the output of a Node.js process. Okay?
Cool.
Yeah. And so we ran it, and we now have a lib folder with a bootstrap folder, and we have all the stuff up here right now.
That's awesome.
So very, very cool. And just to make sure that you see here how we're not actually, Visual Studio is not doing anything that's not already supported. If we just open the command line here, I can just write gulp. Let me just zoom in here. Gulp copy. And let's execute that. And we see we get the exactly the same output.
Right.
So Visual Studio is not doing anything magical here, just calls Bower the same way you would. So that's important to keep in mind. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, is there anything else? I mean, so here's my question. What's the difference between Grunt and Gulp? They're the same.
Yes.
It seems like Gulp is more code-oriented and Grunt is more sort of definition-oriented. Is that a good assessment?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I think there's, I think Grunt was sort of the first one out there, and it was the one that sort of revolutionized the client-side workflow.
Got it.
And Gulp came a little later and was built on different principles, like everything is a stream.
Right.
And if you treat everything as a stream, it's very easy to orchestrate different things. So you might orchestrate things like, the first thing you do is that you find a source file, let's say a less file, and you want to run a compiler on it. Right, so you pipe that stream, that file stream, to a less compiler. That again returns a stream that has the compiled CSS in it, and you can run that to, let's say, an auto prefixer or to a minifier, and then at the end you can then put it on disk, right, with the gulp dest that we just saw.
Okay.
So you can orchestrate very, very in a very cool way like that. So Gulp gives you that. Grunt does not, and Grunt is a little bit different. And it's fine. Whichever one you like, we have equal support for them. So
well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So just to finish up, is this something that you can use now, or is it something you have to use Visual Studio 2015 for?
So the best experience here you get with Visual Studio 2015.
Okay.
There are, however, extensions out there for Visual Studio 2013.
Okay.
So there is the Task Runner Explorer. So this entire thing you see down here. This one is out for Visual Studio 2013 as a free download. It is not as full featured as this, but most of it you get. So that's good. That's one of them. The other one is called Package IntelliSense, and that's one that gives you like the Bower and NPM IntelliSense in the JSON editors.
That's cool.
That when you save the file, automatically installs them.
Yeah.
When you open the project for the first time and you don't have, like, let's say, the node modules and the Bower components folder, because you just cloned it from GitHub and didn't check in those files, it will automatically restore those packages for you, right?
That's 2015 stuff.
That's built into 2015, but you can get it. That's also in the package IntelliSense for Visual Studio 2013.
Got it.
So if you go to visualstudiogallery.com, that's where we have all our extensions. Package IntelliSense and Task Runner Explorer and Grunt Launcher. Grunt Launcher is also gives you some right-click context menus in the Solution Explorer to do some things that are really
nice. But you don't need that in 2015 because is it built in?
Yes.
Got it.
Except for one thing, but that's coming.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us and sort of demystifying all these tools for client-side JavaScript development. Matt, it's a pleasure. You guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.